It's Monday evening. It's scorching hot, and I'm sat in here in a box room, and I'll probably be sweating sooner rather than later. So just bear with me with that. It's literally roasting here. I said I'd bring to you a homeschooling, home education special, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So I'll just bring my guests on to stage. You will all be aware who Rich is. Hi, Rich.
Hi, Mark. Hi, everybody.
Harry, how are you?
I'm all right, thank you. Nice to be here.
Um, Good, good. And then we've got a lady join as well. She's just having some camera issues at the moment. So as soon as she's available, I will get her up. Her name's Kathy. Okay, so you're obviously aware of my situation and what I've decided to do with my boy who's 10. We've talked about it before. It's now happened. We was going to leave him until the end of the year, let him finish his year. But then we found out some more information that didn't sit quite right with me, and that information was that the school which he attended does not have any kind of terrorist protocol. Should that happen, a terrorist incident or a lone gunman or anything like that, nothing in place, and no intentions of doing so either. So that was a straw that broke the camel's back. So it was a phone call to the headmistress. He's coming out on Friday. That is that. She then argued with me, Rich, because I know that you said it's the school's responsibility to notify the council of your intention to take your child off the register. She said that's what I have to do. So I sent her an email and say, no, I'm actually been told that that is your job. So please, can you do that for me? Can you also let them know that we will be home educating and not homeschooling? And please make sure that is relevant in your email that you send to them. She sent me an email back saying, yes, of course I can do that, Mark. We will do that on Monday, being today. And then she put a little caveat in there, basically saying, we have to advise all parents, Mr. Heath, that you should notify the inclusions team of what you're planning. I can tell you that the inclusion team were not contacted, and nor will they be. Rich, can you just tell us before we go to Harry what the inclusion team actually are and what they, if we were to contact them, what would happen?
Okay. Well, I don't know if I can answer that because it's different in different local authorities, right? But just for
Okay,
people to know,
your
ones
understanding, yeah.
they can follow me on X, but I'm also a child protection social worker, and I've got he'll be 21 in August, and she'll be 18 in October. They've never ever been to school. I've worked with families as a social worker where I've come across home ed families, and I'm really, really clear about the law with regards to home education. And also I've supported home educating families in a personal capacity when they're dealing with social services or local authorities. Here's the deal with the law. You don't have to tell them anything. If the school doesn't want to tell them, fine. Don't ask the school to tell them. If the school are going to do that or not do that, it's up to them. You don't have to contact them at all. They're your children. And currently the Education Act recognizes this, as is the situation in common law and natural law, that children belong to their parents. That you can educate your children. It's up to you, your duty, either by regular attendance at school or otherwise. You don't have to tell them what the difference is between homeschooling and home education. Homeschooling is what they talk about in the US and what some religious home educators talk about, but in Britain, the term is it's just home education.
Okay, so when you say
to answer your question,
it does in a way. When you say currently, there is a
yes,
bill that's trying to be passed, isn't there, through government, which basically
yeah,
is going to take some, or if not all, your rights away as parents of what you can and can't do with your child with regards to education. Is that your understanding of it as well, Rich?
yeah, it will allow the local authority to. I mean, given the direction of travel and what the governments have been doing since lockdown and possibly before, but it's just got more obvious during lockdown, it will allow the government to keep on creating more and more rules and to keep on determining, no, your education, how you're home educating your kids isn't good enough. Therefore, you can't home educate them. The local authority will get to say whether your kids go to school or not. not you. And this is regardless of any welfare issues. So I have, as a child protection social worker, placed home education children in school, but only because it's been so unsafe for them at home in the Children's Act, because their welfare is at risk. The Children and Wellbeing Bill, if it becomes law in its current form, will mean that they don't have to think about that. They can just use administrative processes to say, no, we get to say where your kids go to school. You're a Christian father, well, good for you. But I'm sorry, they're going to go to school and they're going to learn how to pray according to Islamic tradition.
Sorry,
Or
one of my sons keeps phoning me.
The boys are going to learn that they
I'm on my phone.
Sorry,
Mark.
Alex. It's Harry just joining us again. Let's just leave that there for a minute, Rich. So Harry's with us again, and we've lost you again there, mate. Are you having trouble with your camera? Harry? So that's the two of the guests are both having issues at the moment. So Rich, we'll carry on.
Yeah.
Harry, can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry, I can hear you.
Right, I got you. Can you hear me? Is your mic now, I think.
What?
There you go. Right, let's just move on for a second, Rich. And that's Kathy joining us as well. Hopefully we'll get both these on in a second. Kathy, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we got you. We've got you. So I've just said what's going on with myself. You're probably fully aware of what's happening with my child. We took him out of school.
Hello.
It was his first day out today, to be honest. And we literally just played in the pool. So, Rich, can you introduce yourself to Kathy, please, so she knows who you are and why you're here?
Hi, Kathy. Kathy, I am, apart from also being a vlogger who does videos on crypto and now also politics and macroeconomics, I'm a child protection social worker. My son will be 21 in August and my daughter will be 18 in October, and they've never ever been to school, kindergarten, nursery, primary, none of that business. They did decide to go to college when they were 15. I failed to talk them out of it.
Did they enjoy it at college?
I think my daughter did. My son, after a year, he said, "You were right. You were right. I shouldn't have gone. It's really boring. They don't teach properly. They make mistakes. Because I've covered crypto, my son's been listening and learning to me. He bought Bitcoin when he was 11. Right, he bought a little bit of Bitcoin. He knows all about money. He goes to college to learn about economics, and he says to me, the lecturer doesn't understand money. He doesn't understand how it works.
No.
He thinks Ukraine are going to defeat Russia.
Kathy, can you let Rich know what your position is and how we talked and the reason you're here as well?
Okay. I'm basically started with this probably just over a year ago. I was obviously, it's to do with gender is the main work that I do. Basically, we had issues with our changing rooms. They wanted to make them mixed sex, and I started investigating it. Discovered an LGBTQ group was involved with the council in organising a trans inclusive space. And I then found out that not only that this group was actually going into all the schools in Cornwall and 27 schools in Devon, teaching LGBTQ indoctrination, I believe, to children during the lunch break. And I couldn't believe how much was involved. So there was a few of us who felt the same way, a few mums and things. My son's actually 30 now, thank goodness, so he's missed all this nonsense. And we got together and we went through all the schools in Devon, Cornwall and Dorset. We went through their school policies and we went through the groups that are going in there. And we were absolutely appalled at what we found and what they were doing. 75% of them basically had got the Equality Act wrong. They were actually indoctrinating children. It was going through the curriculum. It was in assembly. They basically had discipline policies for children if they misgendered anybody or used the wrong pronouns. Advice on how to wash binders on school trips and that children could choose the tents they wanted to sleep in on school trips according to their gender. It was just unbelievable. We actually got published in the Telegraph, and that as an expose of what was going on in schools, and we sort of carried on from there, really. So we called ourselves Protect and Teach, because we just feel that's it. We just want to protect children from all of this and just teach them, like you say. They're just not teaching them. It's unbelievable. So what we do is we get contacted by parents and we help them. We help them write letters to their school. We sometimes go and talk to parents outside of the school. We write to the school. We took on the Church of England. We wrote to them about their school policies, which are awful, and their valuing all God's children. We've written to the House of Lords. We work. We just take a project and we immediately start to work on it and work out how we can work on it, where the information is that we need, and how we can put it in.
So there's going to be people watching this that either are thinking about taking their child out of school for a particular reason, that have done so, and want to know the legalities behind it. And I know, Rich, I know what you'll say to that. It's your child, do what you will. But people who I've spoken to say it's not quite as easy as that. It's people have been telling me that I'll get regular visits to find out what I'm teaching my child.
Mark, are these people that have actually home educated themselves? Like they're home educating their kids?
Some, yeah. To be fair, some have, yeah. Some are,
right.
Some are, okay. But there are some random people as well that are just saying, and you know, I've got a lot of abuse from it. You know, you're not setting the right. You know, you're destroying your child's future. Blah de blah de blah. Everybody's got a reason for doing what they do. I have 3, which everybody knows about. Kathy will know as well. And Rich, am I right? Your children never went to school?
Never. No,
not at all.
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. No way. No way. No way. And I was a bit fortunate because I never registered them. The local authority didn't find out until I think my son was 8 or 9. He was doing an experiment to see how a Nerf gun works. So he looked down the barrel of the gun and shot himself in the eye. He said later he thought he was pointing it at his ear. My wife took him to hospital, right? And they say, you know, what school is he at? And she says, well, he's home educated. And they also said to him, they also asked, are social services involved? She said no. At the same time, he said yes. Now, my wife, Scottish, middle class, articulate. No. She means his dad's a social worker. So I don't think it was that. But the hospital informed the local authority. The local authority then wrote to me, as they are allowed to do under case law, that they can make, and actually under statute as well. I'm just thinking they can make reasonable inquiries. So they wrote to me and they said, we'd like to come and visit you and see your son and your home education provision. And I wrote back and I said, no, I don't know. My job is to protect my children from the interests of strangers or whatever. He's too young. No, you're not going to come and see him. However, I will send you. Now, this is important for home educators. You do got to do this. I will send you a philosophy of education. And in the philosophy of education, you can find templates online. Make sure you look for home education, philosophy of education. I said, this is why I'm home educating, because personalized education, much better quality of education, much better social results, much better educational outcomes. And then I said, this is what they're doing. And I covered the basics, that we're covering their social, their physical, their academic, and also their spiritual, which for me was, okay, so they're playing. I said, we read to them regularly. This is what we do. We read to them regularly. He's in gymnastics class. I can't remember the other stuff that they do or whatever, right? They're in various home ed groups. And in terms of physical activities, whether that's a gym, spiritual activities, which you don't have to. I go to Quaker meetings, I take him along, right? And they wrote back to me and they said, okay, thank you. We'll contact you in a year. And then every year they ask me, we want to come and see you and your son and his home education provision. And I say no, and I send them a philosophy of education about what we're doing. And then it got to, and I'm always late to reply. I'm not, my job, I'm terrible. I'm a terrible council official. I'm not interested in making their job easy, right? And then there was a new director of children's services that came into the local authority area. And they wrote to me and they said, look, we'd like you to bring your child in so we can meet him. And I said, why? And they said, well, the new director of social services wants to meet all home educated children. So, okay, do you have any concerns or any evidence that my children their welfare is at risk? Because I know the Children's Act inside out. I'm a child protection social worker. Do you have any evidence that their welfare is at risk? No. Okay, well then go away. I'm not interested in introducing my child to strangers. That was the end of that. And then it got to a point, you know, he's 16. He's in, go away. Now, I never told them about my daughter. I don't have to. And they never wrote about her. She wasn't hidden.
Okay.
My son's not hidden. They're registered with the GP. They go to the dentist. They're registered at the local library. They're in clubs and home ed clubs and things. But I, you know, like you, Mark, and I think you as well, Kathy, children belong to their parents. No one's going to love them or care for them more than me. No one's going to love your son, Mark, more than you and your wife. No one. No one's going to care for them the way that you do. And, you know, as a social worker, I care about the children that I work with. But that's different to the love that I have for my own children or my nieces or nephews. I'll care about those children as long as you pay me for a certain amount of hours. And it's the same.
Legally, you have the duty as well to educate them. It's parents that have the duty to educate them, not the state.
Well, legally and lawfully and naturally and spiritually and philosophically, they're mine. They're not the same.
We're actually chipping away at that, you see. I mean, for one, you know, for example, like headmasters being in charge, or mistresses being in charge of how much leave your child has from school. Because I worked shifts. I was a midwife. My husband was a paramedic. We could never get time off during the holidays. Yeah. So we used to take our son out of school. And you used to just say to the school, we're taking them out on this date for a holiday, and he'll be back on this date. And now you have to get permission. You can get fined. It's like they own your child.
Yep.
And it's a little drip of everything. This is the way it's going. It's just a tiny tweak that has made a massive difference now. And how many parents have been fined because of that?
Yeah. Well, one is that people who you want to take your kids out of school and not pay the fines, go to Probity Code. Was it probitycode.com or bit.ly/lawful tax protest? You don't have to pay the fines. And this is using statute to not pay the fines. But anyway, it's always been that way for school. I didn't have, there was a certain medical intervention that was all the rage a few years back. Everybody was talking about how safe and effective it was. I didn't have it. There was no way I was going to have it. No way, no way, no way. Right. And to me, the whole thing was a lie. And the other things that went on at the same time, they were also a lie. You could sit down but not stand up if you wore a certain outfit or whatever, right? Certain garment. It was all a lie. And there's so much stuff that we've been lied to about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, the lies about this war and that war. The schooling is a lie. School was not designed to teach. It's designed to school, which is distinct from educating.
Yeah.
And school is a tool of imperial colonial control. It's how the state instills whatever ideology it wants children to have in service of the state, not in service of the children or in service of the parents.
Absolutely.
So,
Kathy, we were talking before. We were talking
Right.
before you came on, Kathy, and we were saying that there's a bill that they're trying to get passed through Parliament, which will affect on what we can and can't do with our children. You're aware of that, and how do you think that's going to?
We were a meeting with the homeschoolers group, a Zoom on it, and it's really interesting. I think it's because more children are home educated. They're getting a panic on, because also the people who are home educating are the ones who are more likely to have children that are going to start questioning. And that's just not what they want. They want children to just come out, like you say, schooled in Britishness. So they were saying they did FOIs around the country. Now, not all of the cities replied, but they know now that there's 112,000 children being homeschooled at the moment. And that's up from 21 when they had 81,000. So, and they said that is an underestimate because a lot of big cities didn't reply to the FOI that they sent out. So that's an underestimate. So it's gone up 38% in 3 years. So that's quite incredible. But that is, again, why they're panicking and why they're bringing in this bill. So it's going to, I don't know if you know much more about it than me. Yeah, go on.
I just want to say it isn't just that, Kathy. It is that, but also the new bill will give children IDs. They'll have digital identities. They have to provide all this information. So do the parents. So it's a way of capturing families that are sort of, some of them are completely outside of the system. Some are at the edges of it, capturing them so that they can all be funneled into the digital IDs and the biometric digital IDs, the CBDCs, the carbon trackers, that everything is flowing towards, so that we are completely owned. And the problem with home educating families, like you said, is that they are outside of this. There's one Western European nation which completely banned home education. It's very difficult in Sweden. There's one European nation completely banned it because they didn't want children escaping from the dominant state ideology. Can you guess what Western European nation that might be?
Go on.
Well, I'll give you a clue that it was in the 1930s. This nation passed this law. Germany under Hitler. I don't care if your dad is a trade unionist. I don't care if your dad is a communist. That your children are not going to escape the ideology of the Hitler Youth movement. And then the British did that in India. I don't care that your parents are Hindus or Muslims. You're going to learn about our gods, not your gods. You're going to listen to us as your lords and masters, not your parents. So it was designed to separate children from their parents. And we see the British imperialist ruling class doing the same thing now in the Christian school that Mark, as a Christian, sent his Christian son to, so that they can, what they're doing is using Islam to divide and rule. They'll use anything, right? But in this instance, it just happens to be Islam to divide and rule. It doesn't matter that Christianity is important to you. You will succumb to what the state tells you. The state knows better.
Well, these regulations, as you say, are very strict as well on recording everybody involved. So anybody involved in educating your child has to be recorded. So obviously that's both parents. Both parents have to be recorded as well. And that's the full details. Now, one concern is in an abusive relationship where one partner doesn't know where the wife and children are. Now that's going to be going on a central database. The father and his details and the wife has to go on there. Don't tell me that someone's not going to phone up and ask some cleric, oh, my ex-wife, I've lost her postal address. Could you give me her details? You can just see it happening. And also it means like grandparents, for example, are going to take your child to the museum to show them, art or whatever. And they have to be recorded. Their details have to be recorded, their address. Say your grandmother's remarried somebody else, or she's got a boyfriend, he goes with her, he has to be recorded. So you're getting like this huge web of everybody. Your friend comes in and teaches geography, maybe. She's really good at geography. So all the kids that are homeschooling, she'll do a special session for them. she has to be recorded when she comes in, how long she's training. You'll have a set amount of time that you let the government know this has gone on. Otherwise, you're going to face 9 months in prison.
Yes.
That's actually the first time they've got a bill where you go to prison. And from the social work side, how if you hear stuff coming through, because they're going to arm the social work department. So say as a religious person, you're not educating your child on homosexuality, okay? Mm-hmm. So the school will say that they're concerned that you're not following the national curriculum, that you are not doing this part of the education. So they will send social workers around to review what you're teaching your child. And they then have the power to say whether you're not teaching LGBTQ stuff as you should be, like we're teaching in schools, therefore your child has to come back into school. That's the sort of power that they want to have. So you imagine the pressure it puts on a parent of, being so scared of someone coming round to their home and analysing what they're doing with their child in case they say, well, I'm sorry, you don't seem to be covering history enough. You're not doing the LGBTQ. We're worried about the level of maths now. Because you're not following the curriculum, the state curriculum. That will be the thing.
Yeah, but Kathy, there's something else, right? That's all disgusting and horrible and onerous, right? And then what they're going to do in terms of men and women, women fleeing domestic abuse relationships, they're having their details available to their abusive former partners. That's really, really horrific. But as this rolls out, the effect of it will be to destroy home education. So if I'm a tutor, a maths tutor, and I have a little business teaching home educated kids, it ain't worth it, because they're going to use bureaucracy to destroy the system in the same way they're using bureaucracy to destroy farming, so that farmers spend more time filling out bloody paperwork for nonsense regulations versus growing food. So this will destroy home education. And, I'm kind of grateful that my kids have grown up and now I don't have to deal with this, because this is horrific. But I think what we have to do is we have to find ways of protesting. We have to find ways of jamming up the system, which can be all sorts of things like delayed responses. The local authority kept getting my son's name wrong. I never corrected them, because I know when it turns up on a court order, they also got his date of birth wrong. That slows, if it ever got to that slows things down. We have to appeal. We have to do all kinds of little things. We've got to use the probity code process to protest. And then we've got to go back to our constitutional rights. People don't know that England, and I mean England to include all the 4 territories, has a constitution. That's how come it's a constitutional monarchy. And there's protections in that constitution, the 1688 Bill of Rights, plus the Coronation Oath Act, that the laws have to be consistent with the customs of the people. And it's customary in England that parents have sovereignty over their children. It's always been that way. And Keir Starmer doesn't get to change it because he's at the service of the WEF and being blackmailed by certain young men from Eastern Europe, perhaps.
I don't know if either of you can answer this, but say, like in my position now, my son's been deregistered, I'm officially home educating, and then this bill gets passed. Where would I stand legally? Will it be that because he's already being home educated, that will be that? Or could there be a possibility that they could force my child to go back into a school?
Well, it depends on what the final form of the act is, right? What's got amended and thrown out? Because I did see this really great article. This is Rabbi Grat on Substack about what was happening in the House of Lords. The House of Lords are appalled by it. Rabbi Asher Grat, British Rabbinical Union.substack.com, because this will completely undermine any form of religious schooling, including Orthodox Jewish schooling. Now, I didn't home educate my children. Their home education was secular. They just played and played and played and played. But for, for Christians and Hindus and Jews and Muslims that want to pass on their values, their philosophy, their religion to their own children, as is their natural God-given right, then this law would prevent that. The House of Lords are kicking up a stink about it. But when we've got an amendment coming through in the criminal police bill, Mark, I don't know if you know about this, right? But there's this amendment putting through that would allow abortion at full term. Who asked for that? And then the assisted murder bill.
Mm.
If someone's depressed, they could ask to be suicided, murdered by the state. So when they're doing all of this now, that bill is receiving opposition. So let's hope, right, that it does get amended. But then, there's, for us as parents, there's nothing more valuable than our children.
No.
If we're not going to stand up and protest for their safety, and Kathy, in a moment, I just want to come back to about the great work you've been doing at Protect and Teach, right? To give my perspective as a social worker on that, if I'm in a moment, right? That, if we're not going to stand up for them, then for our own children, who is? And then what they've been doing with the, forgive me, Kathy.
No, you carry on.
What they've been doing with the LGBTQ stuff, it's sexualizing children. It's child sexual abuse. Because you're introducing those concepts to children who don't have the emotional maturity, the intellectual maturity, the relationship skills to deal with those issues. So they're being sexualized at a young age. You want to teach, some 14-year-old or 15-year-old, they're in puberty, and say, okay, there are people who like their own sex and there are people who like the opposite sex. But the most important thing is relationship and a moral context, and this is how you keep safe. That's one thing.
The more it's normalized, the more actually, sorry, the more it's
the homeschooling group are not going to comply with this either. You only need 20 to 30% of people to not comply with something. It's not workable.
Well, Kathy, I think you actually need less. You actually need less. I was listening to an interview by Martin Armstrong, who's got this really great computer model that's used by governments all over the world that follows cash flows and predicts all sorts of things, because where is the big money moving? And he did a study, and he said for countries to become independent, it takes 15% on average of the population. Now, I've heard for revolution, it takes between 3 to 5%. Now, I'm not saying we got to have certainly not a violent revolution, because I'm a Quakerish sort of Muslim, right? But we got to stand and say no. And I was involved in the poll tax demo, in that protest. People were like, no, we're not going to do this. To make it, got to be ungovernable. The way the Blade Runners are doing it, the way that people refuse to wear masks and went on those pro-freedom demos, pro-lockdown demos. No, you're going to stop me from hugging my cousin or hugging my mother-in-law. I get to say, not the state. So yes, I mean, what else are we going to do, right? Give in.
Exactly.
All right.
Neil's put a message on. He said schools are just recruiting centres for evil ideas, just destroying society as soon as possible. It's got George Soros all over it. Kathy, it was interesting for you to give us the numbers of people that are home educating at the moment. I was quite shocked that the more I've looked into it and the more I've looked locally of what's going on in my area. I'm in Rutland, so it's the smallest county. There are dozens of groups of a whole plethora of things that you can get. I was quite shocked, to be honest. I thought, I'm going to be on my own. I'm going to be alienating my son, this, that, and the other. But what I actually saw was group after group after group of parents doing the same thing, meeting up, socializing, bike rides, fishing, a whole range of different things. I was just being interviewed before I came and done this one by a guy, and he was asking me about homeschooling because of what I'd put. And he basically he asked, how did it go down with my son? And I said to him, he he was in tears when I first told him. He was in tears and it was all to do with his friends. He thought he was going to miss out on his friends. Now we've obviously come over that, and I truly believe that his social life and his social skills are going to be so much better now than what he would be by being at school, because the difference of groups we're going to be taking him to, you know, activity. We've spent the day in the pool today, and Rich was one of the people that said to me, look, I wouldn't do anything with him for the first couple of weeks, de-school, which is the thing, and quite a few people have said that to me. What advice can we give, Kathy, of parents that are in a similar situation where they're not happy with what their children are exposed to at school, whether that be religion, whether that be woke nonsense, as I call it? What advice can you give for parents, firstly, that are not in the position to home educate? We're quite lucky that we can, because I don't work because of health, so I'm able to be here. But there's a whole load of parents that can't. So what advice can we give parents that are not happy with the way their children are being schooled, but are in the situation where they can't just pull them out? Sorry,
well, first, they're not alone. Definitely not alone. And they will tell them that they are. That's the big thing the school will say. No one else has complained about this. You're the only one who comes in and says anything about this. Get your facts, get as much evidence as you can before you start, because they'll try and close you down pretty fast. I believe we should have a system like America where you actually have a school board. It's really difficult to actually access your school. I would start nicely at first. Keep your powder dry, because there are lots of ways that you can approach this, and we've got lots of schools that are doing it wrong. And we've got our group, for starters, is one. You can contact a group like us. There's also Safe Schools Alliance, Parents for Education, Our Duty, Transgender Trend if you've got an LGBTQ problem. Don't Divide Us, that's very good as well. And they all give advice. They usually have letters on that you can download a letter that you can actually fill in and send to the school. We'll help you write a personalised letter. We try and get people mentors. So we try and get someone who's got someone locally to them who would maybe come along to the school with them. It's very difficult because often it's left to the women to do this because the men are working more. So, you know, schools are 9 to 3, aren't they? So actually getting an appointment, it often means that it's the woman that ends up going, who's then made to feel as though she's just, you know, a helicopter mother and she's making a lot of fuss about nothing. They also, from experience, the school will definitely deny what you said. They'll say your child's just made it up, or your child's overheard something in the playground. That's one thing that we find. So having the evidence is really good. I mean, I'm against phones in schools. However, the advantage is if you've got a savvy child who can take a screenshot of something they're being shown or something they're being given, that's really great for us to use, really. I would say,
Kathy, I don't actually think the schools are trying that hard to hide things anymore. You know, we get from my son's school, we got sent out what's happening in the term, and it's literally there. Every Monday afternoon, we're going to be teaching Islam. Then we're going to this mosque on this day, and it's just presented to us on lap. And I know that the next year coming would have been the start of sex education and LGBTQT and all of that. So, you know, I found out that way. That's how we realised what was going on, and then we asked the child what has been taught, and that was it. And you are quite right when you say this, because I was the one that sorted my boy out and the school. My initial conversation with the head teacher was, I was made to feel like, you know, that who the hell are you to tell us what we can teach your child? That's how I was made to feel. You know, I got arrested last year and sent to prison for posts about a certain subject, and then I am ringing up the school saying, I don't want my son being taught Islam, and I don't want him going to a mosque. I already know what picture they've got of me. You know, I don't really care, to be honest. That's my prerogative if I don't want that. You know, it's like Rich said, Christian school, we want them taught that. But people should be wary about the schools digging in their heels when it comes comes to this. They try and actually make you feel bad that you're a bad parent, that you're going to be affecting your child's future. My advice is, personally, I'm only just started on my journey, but my advice is, if you come to a decision that you're not happy with what your children are being exposed to, then you have to speak up, because if you don't, then it will go unchallenged. I don't know where you sit on this, Rich. Obviously, you've heard what Kathy had to say on it. What's your take?
Okay, so I have a slightly different take, which is that even if this LGBTQ stuff wasn't going on, I'd say, get them out. Even if you're a single parent on benefits. I've met plenty of single parents on benefits who are home educating. And here's why I say that. What we want as parents are the best outcomes for our children in terms of academic performance, literacy, numeracy, social skills, self-esteem, emotional intelligence. Home education outperforms anything school can provide. School is defective, absolutely defective. There's this concept in social work called normative abuse, which is where there's a practice that is abusive but has become normalized and accepted. Now, I'm going to say something that some people may be upset about, but hear me out, right? Britain has a very low rate of breastfeeding because there was this push by formula, by Nestle and whoever, right? Formula is just as good as, if not better, just as good as. Well, no, it's not as good as what God intended. It's not as good as what nature intended. Now, there may be a few rare instances where a mother can't breastfeed, but in a culture where bottle is being pushed, people just go along like that's the norm and that's the better option. And the same thing has happened with schooling. School wasn't designed to educate. It was designed to teach children COC, conformity, obedience, and compliance. And that's irrespective of LGBTQ stuff. They just want them to comply and conform to that nonsense right now. So if you want your children to have the best outcomes in terms of their holistic development, take them out anyway. No, what we had to do is we had to become a single income family. You know, there were times where both of us were working part-time, or I was traveling and working in London because I could earn more in London as a social worker than in my home city. And then my wife can look after the kids. And then they're home educating parents, single parents on benefits, because there's nothing more important. There's nothing more important than my children and setting them up for life. And what it takes to home educate is that sort of commitment. Now, if you're willing to do it, great. Go get support from the groups that you mentioned, Kathy, but also education. Otherwise, now, if you're not willing to do it or you're not willing to explore, okay, your children will be damaged. Schooling damages children. And parents who say, no, that's not the case. Well, perhaps what they don't want to confront is how by giving into the system and putting their children in school, what they love more than anything else, they don't want to acknowledge that. Just like people that have had that medical intervention that was all the rage don't want to acknowledge. No, you got suckered in. Mm-hmm. You got suckered in. I made sure I got plenty of sunshine.
There's very much a thing of conforming as well for parents, because we go to schools and we speak to parents before they collect children or after they've dropped off. And you definitely, where there's a lull and it goes quiet, you'll get a parent coming up saying, oh, I totally agree with this. I really don't think this should be going on at the school. And then the minute they see another parent coming, they scuttle off. And then you get the very vocal parents. Well, this is where it is for everything, isn't it? Who conform and sort of say, I think this is wonderful. I think it's necessary for my 9-year-old to be taught about different sexualities and all about trans. I know, I wanted to cry, actually. It actually ruined my day. And they're actually full on. I had one woman, she had a little tiny girl, pretty little girl, 7 years old, going in, and we were actually campaigning because they'd made the toilets unisex. And we had a child with chronic constipation because it was a girl who didn't want to go, and the boys were coming in the girls' toilets because they'd taken all the doors off. I said to her, you know, your daughter's going. I said, how do you feel about the fact that there are boys now in her toilet? And she said, well, she is a modern way. She's got to learn.
Wow.
Okay.
I said, what? She said, she's got to learn to have boys in her spaces. Boys and girls need to mix. This is the modern way now. And I'm just gobsmacked and so she's the very vocal one, you see. She's the very pushy vocal mother who's there saying, yes, this is wonderful. And your other people who don't like it, probably the ones that should take them out of school, are the ones, you know, keep her child in there, because if she's that nutty, they're probably better off in school. But you know, it's the parents who don't have the strength really.
Yes.
Yeah, go on,
In
Rich.
fact, can I come back to? They've been well schooled. These parents have been well schooled. Do as you're told. Don't question, and be like everybody else. And Mark, I don't know if I said this to you when we first spoke about this, right? But the way that school tests for obedience is by having children engage in activities that have no meaning. You know, if I assume for your son Christianity is important,
yeah,
right? But that's what you want to create for him, right? So if a teacher asks him to pray, he go and say a prayer, and he goes and prays. Is he doing it because Christianity is important to him, or he's doing what he's told? Well, the only way to test and train for obedience is to have people engage in activities that have no meaning for them, that have no value for them. So you've got to learn 1066, and your Christian son has to go and learn how to do Islamic prayer, because that has no meaning for him. And then I can use it as a test, as a teacher, for obedience. And then, Kathy, what you were saying about the parents that go along with this, here's what people don't get. These policies are policies for pedophilia. Sexualizing children at a young age is sexual abuse, and it's a form of grooming. Now, what happens when a pedophile, or when that's going on? Not only are the victims being groomed, but the people around the victims are being groomed to go along with it, or being groomed to keep quiet. And if I use Jimmy Savile as an example, it was an open secret what he was doing, but he groomed the people around him to either because they were captured in some way, or compromised in some way, or they were capitalizing it in some way, or they were groomed to keep quiet or look the other way. And it's the same deal. These are policies for promoting pedophilia. You sexualize a child at the age of 6 and 9. And I know what's going on in Ireland, because I've done videos about what's going on in Ireland. It's much, much worse. They're much further down the line, where there's books for 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds about fisting. What on earth does a 12-year-old need to know about fisting without any moral context, and without saying, look, this is what you need to do to keep safe?
We had
yourself.
We had this in Plymouth, a mother with her 11-year-old daughter, and it was part of the, they do a project where kids read certain books, you know, so it's by a black author, a woman, a book by someone who was a slave, you know, so they have all these books they've got to do, and of course an LGBTQ one. So she came home with a rainbow book, and so luckily her mother said, oh, what's that you're reading? And she said, oh, I get a tick for reading this book. And that was Juno Dawson. This book is gay, and that's all about anal sex. She was 11 years old, and there were diagrams in it, because they sent us all the details, the photos. Now, she luckily never read it because her mother got it first, but that child can't unsee that at 11.
And it normalizes that.
Interestingly enough, the headmaster had never read it. No, none of the teachers had read it. The book is just, because all of this stuff is actually paid for, as you know, funded, and sent to schools for free. So it comes as a package. So I would just love to know, I don't think anybody buys these LGBTQ books. I think they're given for free. I mean, I don't know if you know that groups actually, you can go into an LGBT group and you can say, could you send 50 quid's worth of this book to this school down the road? So, you know, you've got a couple of kids next door to you and you're a paedophile. go down to your local LGBTQ club, get them to send them Juno Dawson's This Book is Gay. It'll arrive as a package to the school, free books. They'll just put it in their library. Probably Pride Month, they probably have on special display. And your child is the child that picks it up because it's on the list of ticks that they get. You know, they get a bonus for reading that book. I mean, it's a big, it's absolutely huge what we have to unravel here and what's going on in schools.
Now here's how that could roll out. So that child, that 11-year-old girl, reads a book about anal sex, or 11-year-old boy reads that book, right? Parent doesn't know. And for them, it seems it's now kind of normal. It's in the book. They visit that play on the kid next door, the 6-year-old kid next door that they play with.
Mm-hmm.
So now that 6-year-old kid has been sexually abused by another kid, an older kid next door. And then that 6-year-old kid, they start acting up. And all of a sudden their behavior is sexualized. They're causing all sorts of problems at school. So they ring up children's services that we think something's happened. So then I go in, I get the information from the school. I go and do a home visit. There's been nothing going on in the home, but now mum and dad don't trust each other. This whole thing destroys families, destroys religion, destroys culture, destroys society. So we have to say no.
And it comes down from the UN, you know, like breakfast now in schools. That's a UN want every child to have a breakfast paid for by the government. But the UN want comprehensive sex education, they call it. And they want it to be really comprehensive, means you're basically telling children everything there is to know about sex. And who mentioned comprehensive sex education? Pi did back in the 70s. In an interview, those two men on the BBC said that children should have comprehensive sex education. And the UN actually have it in their charter. And I can't tell you, because I get teaching materials and everything. I've got teaching materials here for 13-year-old girls, talking to them about pornography. And it's a teacher's guide to how to teach 13-year-old girls about pornography, because girls need to know about pornography so they don't get caught in pornography. And I have to say that, you know, we're mature women. And when I read out to them what was in this book for training teachers, I probably don't even want to mention it here. It's so awful. None of us had even heard of it. It was all about pornography and anal sex for women and porn actresses. And you're teaching that to a 13-year-old girl. And then in the teacher's guide, it shows Egyptian murals, very explicit Egyptian murals showing this has always been around. Children have always been seeing this, and it's Egyptian murals in a pyramid somewhere. It's just so awful.
It's grooming.
Yeah, it's definitely grooming. The NSPCC is a really good example of that. They had the no pants or something. You must remember it. And it was a really good thing about no one should touch your pants except for, you know, your parents or whatever. And it's now changed. And the no pants thing has a little girl and a little boy totally naked in a cartoon. Their pants and vest aren't on them anymore. Their pants and vest are beside them. And then every part of their body is labelled, like vulva, scrotum, penis, nipples. This is the NSPCC. So this is for children under 5 in nursery school, in nursery schools. So it's teaching them about knowing about their body. Now, paedophiles, we had someone who works with paedophiles in criminology. And they said that they assess the child by how much knowledge they have. So they question the child, and a child that has a lot of knowledge about body anatomy, they believe is a child to target because it's possible that they've already been groomed by somebody. So the fact is the NSPCC are the groomers doing, you know, with the sort of information they're giving them. So that child knows the correct names of everything. Now, you know, I was a midwife, so I used to talk a lot to my son as he grew up about about how things happened. And it's up to parents what they decide to call certain body parts. But again, it's up to the parents.
Yes.
You might decide to have a very sort of like boys willies. You might decide not to call boys a penis for a long time. You might decide to call it a willy for a while. But not it's PCC, you've got to educate them, you've got to call it a penis. And then your paedophile says, oh, well, do you know what's in your pants? And the little girl says, oh, yes, I've got a vulva. That's it. He knows exactly where he's going to go with that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rich.
Yeah,
Neil said, sorry, Rich. Neil said the corporations are pulling away from the woke ideology. You can see how the Pride parades were this year. It's dying off, but we need to keep pushing back. I do believe that to be a correct statement. What I will say is this. There's going to be people that listen to this and think, God, they're talking absolute nonsense. This is so far-fetched. I'm telling you now, this is happening in schools up and down the country. You know, yeah. And it's probably even after listening to Rich and Kathy this evening, I'm so glad that my boy's already out, because this is worse than what I even know it to be. Look, we're coming to the end of the podcast. What I would like, if anybody would like to get in touch with Kathy or get in touch with Rich, I can obviously pass your details to them, and I'm sure that they would be happy to talk to you on this matter. But I just want to give you each the opportunity, just a closing statement, if you like, advice before we go. But thank you for joining me tonight. It's been an eye-opener, to say the least. Kathy, do you want to go first?
Okay. Basically, if you're a parent, you're not alone. That, you know, we can help you. We've got a fantastic group of people who are all experienced in dealing with their own schools who can give you advice. It's not the end of the world if you can't take your child out of school to homeschool. So I'll say that side of it. But, you know, there are ways we can help you. But, you know, there's a lot of work to be done.
There is.
Yes.
Kathy, thank you so much for coming on this evening, and I will speak to you soon. And are you happy for me, if anybody wants to speak to you, to put you in touch? Is that okay?
Absolutely fine, yeah.
Kathy, thanks a lot, and I'll speak to you soon. Rich, yourself.
Yes. Well, people can follow me on X, which is x.com/CryptoRichYT. And I'm a bit cautious about making myself available because
No, that's fine. That's fine. That's why I asked.
Yeah, so they should go to educationotherwise.org and actually protect and teach. And I would love to have, I want to speak to you separately about doing something with Kathy and her team at Protect and Teach. What I would say, child abuse carries on when people refuse to see and acknowledge because it's too upsetting to consider it. And then when they don't say no. Schooling was never about educating children. And increasingly what we've been talking about is how it's being used to sexually abuse children. Now you can, if you're a parent with your kid in school, consider, analyze, take a look at, check it out for yourself. And then you've got a choice. Are you going to leave that which you love more than anything else in the world in that environment? Or are you going to say no? You know, the choice is, okay, put them in a context where they're going to get sexually abused and sexualized, or not. Okay, I'm going to go over here.
Great advice. Neil basically said, this is 100% real. You're not alone, and a great show. So cheers for watching, Neil. Richard, I'll speak to you afterwards. I know you want to have a chat with me, but I'll just remove you for now. So that's it. I really enjoyed that, and it's probably opened my eyes a bit more than what I actually realized myself, to be honest. That's the decision that me and my wife came to, is that we had knowledge of what our child was being exposed to, and we were knowingly driving them to that school every single day. And it was like, what are we doing? I know that we've, as a family, have made the correct decision. I'm more than happy with my decision. And do you know what? The first day today, all I heard was my son laughing, enjoying the day. I had more time with him today than what I ever usually do. You know, usually once he's finished his school day, he wants to run upstairs and get on his PlayStation and talk to his mates through his headset. Not healthy. Today I had some quality time with him, and I thought, you know what? I've just got a peace knowing that I've made the right decision. And what I'd say is, just even if you're not in a position to home educate, just take a closer look at the school that your child is going to, because this is not nonsense that we're talking about. This is happening. These things are happening. I have my own reasons for taking my son out, and one of them was woke nonsense and LGBTQT, what he's going to be being taught and exposed to next year. And just listening to Kathy, who has first-hand experience of parents and cases that she's working on, and Rich about exactly what is going on. I mean, it actually makes me even more relaxed about the whole situation now. I knew I'd made the right decision anyway, and my God, after tonight, I'm more than happy. If anybody wants any advice, you can always contact me, and I will get the message over to either Kathy, or I can ask Rich on your behalf. That's not a problem at all. I hope you've enjoyed it. My advice is just take a closer look at what your children are being exposed to, ask questions, and like Rich says, if you can, get them out.